And I'm standing in as deputy for Councillor Penny Holbrook, whose father is, she has a consultant opportunity, an opportunity to see his consultant. He's quite seriously ill, so she can't come today. Right, welcome to the meeting, everybody. Number one is the notice of recording and webcast. Just to advise that the meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube, and that members of the press and public can record and take photographs except where there are any confidential or exempt items. Apologies, I don't think there are any, unless anyone knows about it that I don't. No? Only Councillor, that's right. That's that one. Number three is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declaration of interest? No? Thank you. Number four is the action notes and action trackers report. We've got to confirm the action notes of meetings held on 17th of June and 18th of August. And then we have to note the action notes of the informal meeting that we held on the 23rd of September and note the action tracker. Can we agree the set of minutes for the 17th of June and 18th of August? Can we agree those first? Agree. Thank you. And can we note the action notes of the informal meeting that was held on 21st of September 21 and note the action tracker linked to that? Is that agreed? Noted. Thank you. Does anyone have any items to raise on any of that? No? Okay, so if we move straight into the performance monitoring reports, and I understand that Mira Fuller is going to introduce those and speak to housing, is that right? Yeah. Yes. And then that Jonathan Antill is going to do waste management. And I think at some future stage, we were hoping that we might have some grounds maintenance performance information as well. Okay, I think I know at other committees that I've been to, because we're on screen, people kind of say who they are and just what their role is. Obviously, councillors could just introduce themselves. So that might be helpful if you are a member of the public, I suppose, watching us on screen. So if you could do that, we appreciate it. Okay, should we move straight into the housing, well, the performance reports then? So Mira, handing over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mira Gowler. I'm the Head of Business Improvement Support for the City Housing Directorate. And I'm going to be taking you through a housing performance report for the period to month 5, which is April to August 21. I'll highlight whether each KPI has achieved its target and has outlined the key mitigations for any underperformance. And in line with the current performance framework, I'll be taking you through both the vital signs and the state of city KPIs. So, City Housing Director Performance Report for month 5, the summary, which is shown on page 2 of the report, shows that we have brag ratings for the KPIs. You can see that we've got 4 that are blue, 3 that are green, 1 that's amber, and 2 that are red, and I'll take you through each one of those. So if we could just move to page 5 of the main body of the report, that would be appreciated. So starting with the first KPI at the top of page 5, we will respond to all council house emergency repairs in 2 hours. This KPI is reported 1 month in arrears, so the July result is 98.2%, which has surpassed the contractual target of 98.1%. And in terms of the actual figures, that's 4,053 repairs out of 4,126. The performance is monitored by the service via daily appointments and the performance reports, which are sent to ensure that the contractors remain above the contractual target moving forward. And the breakdown of contract area is NG is 99.6%, Waste West Central is 98.7%, Waste East 97.3%, and 48.1%. So all of those contractors bar Waste East are meeting the target. Moving on to the next one then, which is we will resolve council house routine repairs within 30 days. This is a green target. It's reported 1 month in arrears, so the July 21 result is 94.8%, which has surpassed the contractual target of 92.6%. In terms of actual figures, that's 12,675 repairs out of 13,372. And again, performance is monitored by the service by the daily overdue reports and the monthly performance reports. The breakdown for contractor area is NG is 97.3%, Waste West Central 93.6%, Waste East 92.8%, and Fortum 96.0%. The target is 92.6%, so you can see that all of the contractors are meeting that performance KPI. Moving on to percentage of right to repair jobs completed against period profile. This is a green target and it has surpassed the target. Again, it's reported 1 month in arrears. The July result is 93.6%. And again, the performance is monitored by the daily reports and by the daily appointments and the monthly performance reports. The breakdown for contractor is 94.5% for NG, 93.3% for Waste West Central, 89.7% for Waste East, and Fortum is 96%. The target is 92.6%. So it's just Waste East which is performing below that particular target level. Moving on to the next KPI, which is average days voids turnaround, excluding void shelter properties. This is a red target. So the August 21 voids result was 43.2 days, so it's not achieved the target of 28. And a total of 259 void properties were relet in August 21. The time taken to repair a property is being impacted currently by the delays on the completion of void repair works. This is particularly for the east and west areas of the city, which relates to the Waste contractor. And the repair times in August for the west and east averaged 32 days for the void property, compared to an average of 15 days per property for the north and south areas. So that gives you an indication of where the underperformance is currently at. There are a number of mitigations and a robust action plan that is in place for this particular KPI. And this is to ensure that we can support and improve the void turnaround performance over the coming months. So there was a voids performance pilot that was introduced on the 1st of July, which reviewed the targets for voids and the associated damages. The capital investment and repairs team are working closely with all of the contractors to monitor the performance and obviously to reduce the repair time element of the turnaround as well. There has been significant improvement seen in 2 of those contract areas, and there is an improvement plan that is in place for the other 2 areas, with a review of the pilot that is scheduled for the end of September, but is currently ongoing. And progress will obviously be reviewed with consideration being given to whether there needs to be an issue of a contractual rectification notice to the underperforming contractors. Other mitigations are in terms of the support to reduce the time taken. So 2 households are currently being shortlisted. Again, this is to help reduce the time taken at fit for letting to acceptance. And there is recruitment of 2 additional visiting officer posts which have been approved, and the recruitment is currently in progress and underway. And obviously the additional capacity will help to support the viewings for the north, west and east quadrants, and again will help to improve the frequency of the viewings and reduce the voids turnaround times. Okay, so moving on to the next KPI then, that's the available properties as a percentage of total stock. This is a blue forming KPI. The August snapshot result was 99.4%, which exceeded the target of 98%. The next KPI is percentage of tenancies sustained at 12 months. This is an annual KPI. However, there has been some commentary that's been included in the report just to give you a direction of travel in relation to quarter one. Quarter two will be available from the month 6 reporting onwards. So in terms of the quarter one update, it is showing that lettings were significantly reduced in the period April to June 2020 as a result of the first COVID lockdown. The service obviously was operating emergency provisions during that time and obviously dealing with the most vulnerable citizens. There were 341 tenancies with a start date between the 1st of April 20 and the 30th of June 20, of which 284 lasted for more than 12 months and 57 lasted less than 12 months. So that equates to figure of 83% of tenancies starting in quarter one of 2021 and therefore being sustained over 12 months. There is more in-depth analysis that needs to be undertaken with regards to this KPI, and that will be presented as part of the quarter two reporting. As I said, this is an annual KPI, so the final performance result will be available at the year end. Okay, moving on to households where homelessness is prevented.
Excellent.
Councillor Knox, what's then for this?
Okay, John Benson.
Let's pick that up. So, John Jones, Assistant Director for Housing Management. In terms of the call centre, we're working with the call centre on this. We are aware of the issues, as are the call centre. What we have seen for quite a sustained period now is an increase in the volume. Particular trend, other than the fact it does seem to link to two factors coming out of the lockdown restrictions, people being more inclined to report repairs that they had held back previously, and also people are at home a lot more, people working from home, and therefore more inclined to report repairs on the basis of saying, I'm going to be here, I have not to arrange time off work or a day off, etc. So we're still doing more analysis on that, but, and working with the contact centre to address the problems in terms of calls coming through. In terms of materials, contractors, as much as anybody in the building industry, is facing issues in terms of scarcity of materials, material increase in costs, resources and supply chain in general. Birmingham, it probably comes with a perfect storm. It's at the same time as not just in Birmingham, but across the Midlands, the work on HS2, the work we also have ongoing with the Commonwealth Games, and actually the bulk construction work that's been ongoing in the city for some time. So it is an issue for them, and it's an issue for us in terms of continuing to drive to ensure that they achieve the required performance against the various KPIs they're measured on. The last one was about downsizing, and we operate a scheme called Wise Move, which is specifically aimed at helping tenants, generally by nature, will be more elderly and vulnerable tenants who are living in homes that are really too large for their needs. And we can certainly provide more information on that. Natalie actually manages that scheme. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add at the moment, or we can bring a specific report.
Yeah, we're bringing the figures down. Most people that are downsizing obviously are in band one. We are proactively targeting some matching. We've had recent meetings with Steve around housing solutions and looking at actually how we can have a bit more proactive approach to it. So we have had some success over recent months, and I can bring you the exact figures of that, just to give you an indication of the amount of people that we are moving on from larger properties. So I'm happy to bring that back.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you can do that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor, would your points been?
Yeah, because it will probably be picked up later.
Right, Councillor Oldham.
It's not Councillor Harman.
Oh,
Have you heard of me?
sorry. Sorry if I didn't see you first.
Sorry,
I don't think it matters.
didn't want to jump my turn.
You won't mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, there was 2 points I wanted to make. There was something said about the numbers of properties let during, it was April to June 2020 was reduced. And I have to say, this is slightly beginning to annoy me now, because the instructions that went out at the beginning of lockdown was that if you could work from home, you work from home. If you worked on the till at Tesco's, you couldn't work from home, so you went to Tesco's. If you were a bus driver, you couldn't work from home, so you drove your bus. If your job is getting your void property ready for habitation, then you couldn't work from home. And surely we should have been pulling out all the stops to be letting as many properties as we possibly could at that time and not having them sitting empty, because the families that needed those were in the hotels. A lot of the hotels are down the Hagley Road in my ward. And I got a number of very desperate emails from people. I'm sure we can all agree that living with your family in one room of a hotel at any time is beautiful. Doing that during lockdown does not bear thinking about. And we're providing a service in the same way that gas, electric, buses, they all provide a service. And we should have carried on providing that service. And I think something should be done about that. I don't think we should just go, oh, we couldn't do it and we sat back and we didn't do much at a time when our work was needed more than ever. And the other point I wanted to make is about the voids, which I'm sure we'll all be talking a lot more about voids at a later point. But from the void that I saw that had been left, that hadn't been done up, it's quite obvious that some of our tenants live in the property where they haven't not only done any decorating, they haven't done any gardening, they haven't done any cleaning for years. And that is going to be one of the reasons why these voids then take so long to turn around, because there's so much work that needs doing to them. And we ought to be a bit proactive on that. Now, I suppose there's, we can't do so many things now that we used to do. But during the first year someone's a tenant, I believe they are still on probation. And we could be checking to make sure. Because I don't really expect to see brambles up, to head height, etc. There should be someone that is going around checking that our properties are being looked after. And then when it came to the turnaround of the voids, it wouldn't take so long.
Okay. Do you want to answer those points? In relation
to letting, the lessons did continue.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry, in relation to letting, the lessons did continue. So lessons did not cease. There was a reduction in the amount of lets that took place, but that wasn't due to people not being at work. That was more around people choosing not to move at that time. Mutual exchanges were also reduced. So it wasn't that we actually stopped. The lettings continued throughout COVID, and people did lettings over the phone and contacted customers. We obviously at times had staff shortages along with everybody else, but we continue to provide the service to ensure that lets were made.
I just can't believe that you say some people didn't want to move at that time. If you were living with your family in one room of a hotel, you were desperate to move at that time. So if someone else didn't want to, couldn't you up it to get those people out? It's horrendous.
There was a reduction, and we can attribute that to COVID. And as I said, mutual exchanges ceased, which would give a proportion of our lets. But in a sense of us being available to let the properties as frontline officers, they were available and they were continuing to do that.
And what about the tenancy visits that Councillor Alderman referred to?
Yeah, so the tenancy visits at present, we are looking at housing transformation review, which is going to take place. We're aware of the need to be proactive and targeted. We absolutely want to ensure that we've got that shift moving forward. Obviously, throughout COVID, it has been difficult to go out and visit people. But some of this is an ongoing pattern that we do need to address moving forward and ensure that we are targeting. So the current model is responding to service requests, and what we actually need to build in is 100% correct is the proactive approach in which is being picked up and flagged.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's really on the council's agenda, isn't it? Prevention.
Yeah.
Is absolutely crucial. Why it's taken us so long to realise that, I'm not sure, but I'm glad that we're moving that way because it's absolutely essential. Don't we still do annual tenancy visits? And is that what you're saying has stopped during coronavirus? Or?
Yeah, the targeted visits stopped. We do targeted, so we moved much more from an annual visit approach to targeted. So starting in September, we will be doing all our fire visits. So all of our high-rise blocks will be getting visited inside the property. So that is to 2,000 properties that we will be going out to right through to April. So we do a much more targeted approach, whereas we're not visiting every single tenant like we used to previously. Because one, actually, let's give our tenants credit, but in the main, the majority were, maintaining their properties, living in a comfortable standard. So what we are now looking to do is understanding and having a much more early intervention approach, which is at the point of letting, where we're identifying issues that will require ongoing support, that actually we are linked in at that point.
Can I just say for clarity, when I said the brambles up to here, I didn't mean just one bramble on the side of the garden. I meant the entire garden of 2 shared properties. Councillor Locke saw it as well. You couldn't have opened the French windows because it was covered. That had taken years to get like that. Why someone didn't notice that here's some vulnerable people who clearly can't do the garden.
Right.
What is it coming? Because the point I wanted to make was actually from a slightly different angle. It's the same point. And my point is that when I sort of did the first skim through that with depth, well, hang on, this doesn't bear any relationship to what I'm experiencing in terms of doing casework. And then when I read through then in depth, I realised that the reason for that is there isn't a performance management score for tenancy management. And a big chunk of the casework problems that I've got relates to tenancy management. So I could take you on a tour around in my ward, looking at properties where neighbours have complained exactly about the sort of garden with the 6 foot high brambles right across the back. And I put in a council inquiry about it 6 months ago, and not only is nothing being done, but I haven't even been replied to. And I do wonder whether part of that is actually down to the new casework system. Mira will be familiar with the casework I raised in May, and nothing was done. I chased it, nothing was done. And in the end, when I went to Mira about it, within 2 or 3 days, it had all been sorted, and the council officer who dealt with it said to me, "Well, if you come to me directly, I'd have sorted it straight away, because I know that I had to be told about it." Right? And you think, well, okay, we're here am I trying to do the right thing and go along with the new system. And actually, in that case, it meant that some basic casework wasn't done. But so is there an issue with that, or is there just a fundamental lack of capability, ability to deal with these sorts of tenancy management issues where I've got a grove where a resident asked me to look, and the grove looked absolutely appalling. A number of different things, fly tip fridges, a private house which was empty and in a real estate. Well, the empty homes team have dealt with the private house, that's looking a little bit more tidy. The fridge is gone, the fly tipping is gone. The one thing that just hasn't been addressed is the city council property, massively overgrown in the front with a rotting car and all that. So it's standing up against other council, bits of casework, and it's just not being addressed. So is it that because we don't have a performance management report for that, therefore it doesn't get looked at and other things get dealt with? Or what is it?
So we're looking at developing some indicators around tenancy management, and we are conscious that there is a lack of visibility on that. There's a lot of recording of performance, so that what's been happening. I can say that during the pandemic, we've been dealing with tenancy management, ASB type issues that have probably been at levels of about 140% compared to the normal levels. One of the ways we had to deal with that, particularly during the tighter restrictions, the way of working from home, to deal with that, which isn't ideal. But we recognise that, and as a landlord, we should be out looking at our properties, and that's what we're returning the service to now. In terms of all of our visiting service, our housing officers, the approach will be to have people out there, having much more local responsibility, understand the issues in their area, and it all fits part of what Natalie was talking about earlier, which is changing this to being reactive, to being more proactive, and the prevention side, just like in terms of, again, we were talking about in terms of visiting, in simplistic terms, we almost see that as something that can be done on a sort of red, amber, green type basis. But we know not all of our tenants need visits all of the time or even necessarily annually, but we know that there are various streams we can look at including new tenancies, including perhaps high volumes of repairs, or where we're seeing things like overgrown gardens, where there will be people that we perhaps need to visit certain times a year. So that's the intention with that. So it's really to get the service very much out there on a proactive footing. Yes, let's have some measurements that we can report to you as well. Because that to show something that hopefully isn't poor, but if it is, then it's something that can be addressed. Hopefully it will start to show some really good performance and work that's happening in housing management.
Okay, if I could just bring Councillor North back, yeah, and Councillor Hussain.
Because, you know, the void that some of us visited last week, saw you there, and the overgrown and state it was in. I mean, sometimes by keeping check on, there may be people who are hoarders or may need help or support or things like that. And by visiting and checking up, you know, not being big brother, but, you know, making sure, because there are some young people and they could have dementia or other underlying health issues, and it could be sort of tapped at the source really, and we may be able to get social care and things like that into place and prevent it happening in the first place, and, you know, get the support there that's needed.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Can I bring Councillor Hussain as well?
From Councillor Quickly Wood. Thank you, Chair. You know, when you look at these reports, performance monitoring report, it does not reflect the experience we councillor have on the ground. I can, you know, reading this, I think it's about one page 5, where it's saying that, you know, when you deal with the emergency cases, they normally get back to you within 2 days. I can tell you a case in my work where, you know, in shelter scheme housing, they got this, the electricity, you know, they lost this electricity in this communal area and also in the communal room, and it hasn't been rectified since May. And when I took it up with the manager, local manager, I was told that, you know, there must be some technical problems and they were looking into it. So, you know, what is you find in this report? It does not really reflect on the experience we councils are facing. If you talk about these repairs, you know, I mean, again, that is not the case. You know, if a tenant, you know, got a problem with the repairs, it goes to the council, then it takes so long before they get it work done, right? But in the report, it says, you know, you're meeting the target and all that. You know, I don't know where you're getting all this information from. Councillor Wilden touched on basically for somebody visiting these tenants on a regular basis to monitor the overgrowth, you know, in the garden and all that. At one time, we used to have the housing officers who used to work with the tenants. Do we still have that or not? If we do, don't they pick up these things? That's one question. The other one is, in one of the cases I picked up, and I took it up with the local officers, and this is the responsibility lies with the tenants. Have they changed the policy or something?
Yeah. So we have, obviously, there are housing officers that work with residents, and we respond to a service request at present. Obviously, if we are out on the estates and we see things, then, you know, we will take action against that, and we will work with them. Responsibility, picking up on the point around responsibility of tenancy conditions and somebody adhering to them. You know, I'd interpret that to mean if the garden is overgrown, it is the fundamentally responsibility of the tenant to ensure that that garden is cleared and maintained. Now, if obviously, you know, you go in and the tenant is clearly not capable of doing that, then there's a further conversation that's required to say, you know, is there a way that we need to clear the garden back for them? Do they need some alternate accommodation? what other support networks are available in the community that we would, enable them to adhere to keeping their garden. So there is, those discussions do happen. We've got really good case examples where people have worked with borders, we have worked with hygiene cases, we have worked, on social behaviour, people with drugs and alcohol problems, and, we are having a really kind of in-depth intervention with them, but they are more on a point where we are alerted to those issues. So the proactive part absolutely is where we need to get to, and we do need to have that coverage back in the estates, working much more locally than what we are at the moment. We set up as functionalised teams, whereas we had previously had smaller patches. At the moment, that isn't something that we've got. We've got officers across 2,000, 3,000 properties. So if you take into account they've got to visit that, it's quite a wide spaced area. So as part of the review, that's something that we do want to look at. But yeah, the interaction with customers does happen, and we still have housing officers responsible for those cases that come through.
Could I just suggest that at some point in the near future, that we could have a report from the housing service about how the approach, the prevention approach, is going to change the way some of these things are done. I'm quite interested in bringing all of this together, how hopefully things will change and just be much more, you'll be, as you say, much more proactive around some of these issues than perhaps you have been. Obviously there's a resource issue, but it's just a different focus, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
so that's needed. Okay, so perhaps if we could have that at some point, that would be helpful.
Chair.
Yes. Yes, sorry, Councillor Sharp. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp, by Neighbourhood. I think we have to be very careful when we start going on about social areas, and I live in a social area, and probably one of the very few on the council who actually do. And you can't keep blaming the council because somebody doesn't cut the grass, because somebody doesn't cut the garden. You're given a property to live in. That's your responsibility. And you can't keep saying, oh, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to, excuse the expression, have a kick at the officers and that. Because I think that's a bit unfair, because I know people, and I'll send anybody out in his room to them to see them. And I'll guarantee, I'll promise you the world, and I'll guarantee you go back in 6 weeks' time and nothing's happened. What I think the council has to do is the model to say, if you don't do it, you lose your property. When I was in the forces and lived in Germany, we used to get 2 warnings. The first warning was clean that, and we used to have to do all the stairs in the block. If you didn't, you got a warning of the caretaker. And if you didn't do it the second time, they evicted you. And the thing is, and this might sound nice to people, but I'm afraid this is how I feel. You can't keep forking out money month, year after year to make people cut the grass and that. They've got to have a responsibility of their own. It's their premises. We've supplied the property. We had somebody up our grave, and I'm not going to say who it was, but this family was given a new property. It was a 4-bedroom house. Within 5 weeks, they'd wrecked it. And when I mean wrecked it, they were evicted. But we seem to have a fear that if we evict somebody, we're all going to be on the television, we're all going to say, oh, look at them bad councils and look at this. We've got to get to a stage where we've got the bottle to do something. And we've got to support the people who are having to do the work. It's all right just sitting in the council chamber, voting in that and the other. If the people who are have to do it on the ground, we've got to be there to support them.
Sorry.
Well, that's that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Councillor Sharp. Sorry about that.
It's all right, I'll tell the Lord Mayor to explain.
Right. Okay. I don't know whether you can come back on.
Just say.
Understand what you're saying, Councillor Sharp.
I don't expect you to answer.
No, just had, thank you. I think I appreciate the comments. Obviously, we have got we do deal with antisocial behaviour, we do deal with tenancies, we take possession action when needed, but I think the shift currently with demand on properties, the current homeless situation, people in temporary accommodation, what we need to be doing is sustaining tenancies and, the complex needs of some of our tenants. It's important that we understand root causes first, rather than, looking maybe for the previous style of, 2 warnings and you're out, because actually we then start the cycle repeating again. And what we do need is that real intense focus right at the start, so that they feel valued and that they understand, that they've been given this property and actually we'll continue with them on the journey. So but where it is needed, we do take the action. But I think there's just been challenges at the moment with the courts, and quite rightly, because we're adding to the crisis that we've got at present with homelessness.
Marge, can I just,
Yeah.
I'm just talking when I was in the courts, they have a different aspect of what.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
right,
understand what you're saying, but I think that when we find a case where there is people who need help, have we got the support, not just in the housing, but in the rest of the city council, to actually help these people? No, I don't think they have. Sorry, Chair.
no, well, I think that's exactly what the debate is about, isn't it? About how we can prevent some of this and take earlier action and, assist more proactively. Sorry?
That very point will come up again when we discuss voids.
Yes.
We discuss the way that we're actually engaging with our tenants, because that's all boils down to that. We are not engaging with our tenants. And that's the problem.
Yes, and of course, we're coming on to that as well. I mean, the tenant engagement review, we're going to have a look at later, yeah. Okay, I think we're going to move on. So, if that's all right with everybody. Have a good run now on housing. Can we move then to the waste management performance report?
Thank you, Chairman.
I think, yes, you're going to lead on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jonathan Lansell, the Head of Service for Business Improvements for in-city operations. So performance monitoring report for waste management, looking at month 5, which is August 2021. So there's 4 vital sign KPIs for waste management. On this occasion, we have an even spread across blue, green, amber and red. So if we start with the level of street cleanliness as assessed by the Land Audit Management System. This is a cumulative measure, and year-to-date the result is 80.63, which is below the target of 85%, but is still within tolerance. Therefore, this measure is rated at amber. There is ongoing work being carried out by the Local Streets Initiative, who are focusing on enhancing the street cleansing activities and working with local residents to tackle some of the problem areas. The next one we have is the increased recycling, reuse and green waste, which is for both with and without bottom ash. The estimated year-to-date result is 39.53%, which achieves the target of 39%. This target was profiled to reflect the planned shutdown of Tysley Energy recovery facility in June of 2021, and this measure is green. We move on to the next one. This is the reported miscollections per 100,000 collection schedule. This measure is currently rated red. The year-to-date is 159, which exceeds the target of 100. The in-month result for July 2021 was 230, and this is bearing in mind that the total amount of individual residual and recycling collection scheduled for that month was 2.94 million. So the reported missed residual was 4,799, and the reported missed recycling collections was 1,959. There is currently an ongoing pilot which has introduced in-cab technology. This will assist us to further reduce the missed collections. It will bring in a number of enhancements, such as enabling crews to record any issues relating to a collection or to a miscollection. or the full details of properties that require assisted collections. This technology will also automate back into the corporate contact centre, which will allow our advisors to engage with our citizens in a more solution-focused conversation. The final measure is the percentage of waste which is presented to landfill, and this is our blue rag rating, where smaller is better. So the target is 17%, and we've achieved an estimated result of 8.65%. So this concludes the 4 measures for waste management for this period. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, Councillor Harmer.
Okay, so I want to pick up a couple of points about this. First, I'm concerned about the street cleanliness coming through as amber, because that doesn't tally with my experience and my residents' experiences. And I do wonder whether there's a factor going on, because one of my concerns about street cleansing during the COVID period is that we've had cleansing rotas, which sort of assume nobody's off sick, nobody's taking holiday. As a result of that, during COVID time, of course, those rotas have been shot to pieces. And I think one of the impacts of that is that not every part of the city is being given a fair crack in terms of what resource there is. I'm concerned that some areas where there's a lot of active residents groups and so on have maybe had more share of work than other areas. And I would much prefer to see a scaled down rota that was actually met and actually delivered, so that an area may, instead of being slated for a suite once a week that it never gets, was slated for one every 2 weeks it actually got. So that's my first comment, and I think the difficulty with these ratings is you can have some areas that are nice and clean and other areas that are awful, and it can come out as amber, and that's not a fair reflection of the level of work being done as it should be. The second point is about the missed collections, and we're seeing figures here, which is 59% of target. And my concern about this is not just that there's a high level of missed collections, so we've all experienced that, but it's poor enough. It's the failure of the system to respond and put things right when they go wrong, and particularly in the context of missed system collections. And purely by coincidence, I've had an email come in while we've been sitting here about a resident who's housebound, has an assisted collection, and her daughter's written me an email. So basically, absolutely distressed because she's had a series of miscollections. She's rung and complained about them, been told they've been put right, they've not been put right. And last week, yet again, the assisted collection was not taken. She's got carers coming in, telling her there's great big piles of soil, matters and stuff sitting outside because your bin hasn't been empty. And we can accept that, in difficult times, there will be the odd miscollection. But it's the failure of the system to respond to the complaints and get them dealt with, which is unacceptable even in these circumstances. And that's still going on now. This is about a case in last week and the weeks before that led up to it. So we desperately need to sort that out. Okay,
let's take up those points first. And then to answer.
Well, to comment to this one, so I'm Gary Share, I'm Assistant Director for Streets Team. If we look at street cleansing, you're right. We have been using street cleansers to cover refuse collection. So that means that the routes and the rounds that we've been asking street cleansers to do has been effective because we've been trying to defend and protect refuse collections. That and the rate that we've got in our land data is citywide. And we do know that there is a range of levels across the city. It's not all at that 85%. The land selection is important. We have a completely independent team that is a part of the operations team that do that inspection. So it is a reflection, but it is a reflection across the city. And I think when we get to that point, and we have had a working group to look at how we can present that land data a lot better, I think that's the data we need to get to rather than a generic city-wide approach. We can look at changing the rotas to make it more realistic, so we can actually commit to do that. But the problem with that is that we are then scaling back. So we can look at that. We can look at making it realistic and take out a percentage of workforce so we can guarantee that. That will affect the way that we operate. We can certainly look at that. Our aim is to not to have any sweeping or missing roads. But that is a challenge that we've got at the moment, especially over with this collection. It has gone high, and July this is particular. We did have a particular outbreak of COVID within Perivale, which has created that spike, and it did then come back down. This collections on assisted collections is extremely important, and we monitor that weekly and fortnightly, depending on whether it's recycling or residual, separately as well as within the normal inquiries. And at the moment, we've had Redburn's currently running at 13 residual missed assisted collections and 21 recycling these collections. The way that we operate at the moment is that each crew has the assisted collections on a round data sheet, which is a piece of paper with all the roads and all those properties. And then next to the property, there is a link for assisted collection. Each round has just over 1,000 properties on, so the team is responsible for looking at that piece of paper, that document, and then doing that, making a collection against the document. The trial that we're doing at the moment with the slab in the cab changes that. The assisted collection is on the slab data. So as the crew go into the road, the alert on the property comes out on a visual picture on the actual slab, the tablet that's in the So we believe that assisted collections, which are a vital part and a certain part of the service that we shouldn't be paying, will be resolved as soon as we can get that mobile technology, rather than relying on crews looking at it. But it is something at the moment we do monitor on a weekly basis, discuss it on a weekly basis, and the teams are reminded that they must keep checking the paper document against the roads that they're looking at.
So good to come back on that, because it'd be great if the new system reduces the number of miscollections in the first place. But the real point of my thing was that when they are reported and they're not getting dealt with, that's what people find so aggravating.
Yes, so there's two points to that. So if it's reported, we should go back and collect. We should do that, and we need to do that. The issue is that we try to keep the same team on the same range. So in theory, we should be flagging it up. They should get used to where the assisted collections are and we go. Over the last 18 months, we have been moving people around. So the more stable rounds, it has been more difficult. Around the country, there are services that have been failing to actually get services out. We've been able to maintain 3 streams all the way through, but it has meant that it's not always the same going down that same road. So we are reliant on the individual crews checking that paperwork at the moment on that daily basis, and we will keep reminding to check for assisted collection, because I agree it's not acceptable that we missed assisted collection.
So
Oh, thank you. Yes, Councillor Alden Edgeworth, I think I forgot to say that last time, sorry. Yes, I've got a question for Darren. I have to say, let's start off by saying something positive. I only was commenting yesterday that my complaints about assisted collections have gone right down, actually, so I'm tempting fate by saying that. Get some next week. But that is one thing that I've noticed has got better. And another very good thing is the mobile recycling. But I have noticed the last 2 fortnights in Edgbaston that I think almost a whole round of recycling has been missed. And so my question is the mobile recycling wagon being crewed by a crew who were formerly doing recycling or a crew who were formerly doing street cleansing, or are they completely new people that we're employing to do that?
I'm glad about your assisted collections.
I'm tempting fate.
That's good. It's interesting because on my graph, Liverpool have got the highest percentage.
Well, hopefully not in Edgbaston.
So hopefully we'll get that sorted. But it's one thing that we do need to keep an eye on. The mobile HRC has been a great success. I mean, we're really pleased that the residents have taken to them and are bringing their waste to them. And we want to continue that on going forward. It is a new initiative, so it's anybody that's more new people. What we have done is that we have used some street cleansing staff to go onto there and then backfill the street cleansing vacancy.
Nice.
We wanted to make sure that the crew that were on the mobile HRC know what they're doing, know what they're looking for with especially the recycling control, what they can accept and what we can't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that we have full-time staff on there and then we backfill with the agency in their positions. But they're from street cleansing, not refuge.
Okay, so it's coincidence then at the same time. Yeah, okay, thank you for that.
Okay. Councillor Locke?
I echo what Councillor Mary Locke's touched on. I echo what Councillor Alden says about the mobile household recycling. They really are excellent, especially for people who may not have vehicles and the vehicle turns up and they can take the recycling or can be reused elsewhere and go to charity causes. I've got issues, I mean, I can't price it enough, they're very good. But I get complaints about the way the bins are left. It may be that they're new crew and they're not aware. People have to sort of do the hokey cokey through the bins and everything. And if you've got prams and pushchairs that you can take in children to school, that needs to. And also, people tie up the side, the card, because a lot of people now are shopping online, and pandemic increased that. They put leaving the cardboard by the side, it's not getting collected. Especially if it's been raining as well, they put it out overnight and it's like damp, like wet. So, no criticism of if that could be pointed out.
Yeah, again, thank you for that. So the bins being put back, bins should be put back in a nice straight line. It's difficult getting it right against the right house when you've got bins coming at the back end, but they should be put right and the pod should be put back in. It's one that we constantly mention to the teams. That we've just gone from a trade union meeting where we talked about exactly the same thing, how we can improve the appearance and the delivery back to the bins in the right place. And it's mixed. We have some good teams that are pointing straight back, and we've got some other teams that.
I mean, Dave's excellent. That is really good.
These should be cards, and it's a great point because we have noticed that there is a change in the waste and the waste stream that we're getting, and more card is coming in because people are online shopping, and therefore card is increasing. And it's really important that we actually that card actually gets an income to us. Now the reason there can be an issue where large boxes are left. But if residents are cutting up and bundling it to the side of the recycling bin, then there was no excuse and we should be picking that up because we can recycle that. And not only that, we've got a contract with Smurfit Kappa, which is a Birmingham-based company that will that we get income back from. So we need to make sure that we're close to doing that. But it sounds like the residents are doing everything they should do. We should be picking that up, and that's what I would say that to make that sure that happens.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Russo?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think some of the things I want to raise, already raised, Councillor Armour and miscollection. I think miscollection do happen across the city. It's not just one part of the city. I think, I experienced that in my ward. But as Councillor Alden said that, household mobile recycling centre is a good thing. I think it is good, and I hope that that will help to reduce some of the fly tipping. But I have a concern about the timing of it, from 7 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And, some people have to work at that time in the morning and they will not be able to dispose their rubbish. And I think the timing of it, if that could be looked at, that would be helpful. The other thing is the fly tipping. Fly tipping, basically, I don't think we're getting a grip on that because since the last month or so, we have seen people are getting slow collecting these fly tipping, when we want them to collect, particularly with fridges. Now, fridges, it takes months before they're going to move them, and I don't think that is helpful. When a resident comes to a councillor and asks councillor to intervene to get those people removed, I expect that, they will do that in a reasonable time. Right, it doesn't get removed, okay? Can you please look at that? Because I think that's a very crucial issue. And, the other thing, the last thing I wanted to mention is the street cleansing in the wards. Now, you got the leaf falling now, and you got leaves all over the place. And particularly with this weather, when you have a rain here and there, and then the leaves get slippery and people, it's risky for people to go on them. So, if you look at that side as well and see if you could improve or get more sweepers on so they can sweep these areas. So that's my.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So these collections, yes, we have been fairly erratic this year. So, sometimes we've been really good, and then sometimes we've been really poor. We are experiencing exactly the same issues around the country with COVID and all sorts of things. And we have tried where we can to maintain the 3 separate services, garden and recycling and residuals on a weekly basis. So we are doing everything we can, and we have been stripping some out of street cleansing as well. So I'll do that because, again, we're struggling to get agency staff that are HGV drivers, not only in national substances that we're watching. So we are struggling with that. I totally agree with you with the timing of our mobile HRCs at the moment. So we are looking at that, especially 7 o'clock. The timing, the clocks are going to go back at the end.
Yes, that's true.
It's going to be unsafe to be operating with that. So we're just looking to realign those start times. So it will be starting later and finishing later as well. So we will be doing that. And we hope that will have an effect on quality. We have put some extra crews out there. Again, we would like to put extra crews out that were HGV drivers. We haven't been able to recruit any additional HGV drivers, so we are doing quite a lot of our fly tipping collection with being on tippers because that's the least we can get the crews in to do that. Fridges, we've just doubled crews, so we have 2 crews now operating. We used to only have 1, so we are starting to see that backlog of bridges come down. Hopefully, we will catch that up, and then we will be back into a much quicker and responsive. So that second crew started, and now they're collecting. We're collecting just over around 100 bridges today. So we will be getting out that backlog and we will get all those done. And good news with the street cleansing leaves section that we are just at the moment bringing in those extra crews. Every last year and this year, extra resource has been found between now and just after Christmas to be able to collect leaves. We're just recruiting that up, and those people will be out clearing leaves off the street around the city.
Right, thanks, Darren. Actually, two very brief points from me. Can we have the street cleansing forward stuff by ward? I think we asked for that, didn't we? Could you do something on a ward basis, do you think, that might give us a slightly more interesting picture of it? That was the first thing. And secondly, how does this performance that we've got here on street cleaning compare with pre-pandemic, before we had all the problems of street cleaners being pulled into the bin service? Do you know, or can you remember?
Yes.
Are we going downhill or are we going uphill?
Right, okay. If we start on the first one, the ward base, we have got landscape based on wards. So we can produce maps with heat spots. So you can see that we can do it. So there's a difference between we've seen the landscape in the working group, so we can produce that and happily to bring a report going through that on a ward basis. I think that'd be the easiest way of showing, and that's on cleanliness, it's on detritus, it's on litter and blighting. We've got that layers on that process. We could bring that. I'd like to double check the stats, but we was the last lot of lands data in 2019. We were running high 70s, and now we're in low 80s. So there has been some improvement, not as much as we want, and again that's on a city-wide basis. So I think Councillor Harmer's point, we do need to get, that could be that the clean district wards are getting better and the other wards are getting dirtier. So I think it's really important to look at it on a ward by ward basis. But overall, on a city-wide basis, it has got better. But that's going to high memory rather than that should.
So you'll look into it for us, coming back with a report that's slightly more detailed. Okay, thank you. Right, I think we better move on then to our next item. That's all right, everybody. So we're moving on then now to the housing update. And there are three parts to this, aren't there? So the first part is repairs and capital investment. Then we're looking at voids, and then we're looking at the tenant engagement review that's being carried out. So first one then, repairs and capital investment. And is this you, John?
It is, thank you, Chair. So as Chair just said, we've got various elements of the housing service covered today. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what's happening in the world of capital investment and repair services at present. And first thing to talk about is safety, fire safety, building safety. And really that's a theme that probably runs through all the areas that I'll cover in this overview. Because of the importance of it, particularly as a city with over 200 finalised blocks within its portfolio. And although it's some of those blocks and the ACM style planning was the key issue in terms of rental power, there's still been a lot of work to undertake on that, particularly as there's legislation that's come through or continues to come through, changes in regulations and specifications on other form of planning and inbuilt, etc. So we have a fire safety steering group that really oversees all of those issues, particularly around changing legislation, the impacts of that and what it means for us as a city in terms of how we manage that stock. That is chaired by Sarah Adrian is here today as the acting head of capital investments and repairs. And as I say, meets very regularly, includes representatives from the Midlands Fire Service and other experts, and that normally meets on a 3-weekly basis. And we'll cover the various aspects of legislation that I was just mentioning. We're also a member of the national, since writing this report, it's now the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, from the Ministry, but we're part of what's called an early adopters group. Again, so that attending regular meetings on that, as I myself, that is looking at innovations, the impacts of the reports that are coming out, and really puts us at the forefront nationally in terms of fire safety, building safety. We've got a comprehensive report on fire safety in our high-rise residential buildings. That's now going, again, since writing this, that's changed slightly. It's going to go to Cabinet in December to allow more time, because I understand there's a very packed agenda for November's Cabinet. So we put it back a month so that it can have the time for the discussion. And that covers the whole range of areas in terms of fire safety. You'll be aware of our installation programme for sprinklers into individual flats in high-rise blocks. That is now coming to its conclusion and will be complete this year. We've got a substantive programme of other work. I was referring to the changes in regulations and specifications around materials on buildings and inside buildings, such as changes in specification on internal individual flat door fire doors. So that has led to a very substantive programme. I'll talk about that a little bit more as we move down into the capital programme. And also new models that we need to bring in to ensure the safety of our residents in blocks. We're undergoing the job evaluation process that will see us appoint, the commencing appointment by early spring next year of building safety managers and building safety officers will have a specific responsibility for the day-to-day safety of our high and low-rise buildings. I'll move on to the capital investment programme. Said in the overview, enormous demand and pressure on the budget available. All sorts of pressures for capital investment, the replacement of various key elements of properties, kitchens, bathrooms, doors, rooms, etc. So around structural programme. And key to that at the moment has been the fire safety programme, and including sprinklers, also including the work we're doing to our high-rise blocks. That has led to the injection of just over £12 million extra capital funding from the housing revenue account this year to help us keep pace with the work that we're doing and to meet our targets on that. Again, I stress it's not removing cladding in the style of Grenfell Tower, but it is still essential fire safety work for us to undertake. We also have substantial structural investment pressures. I mentioned we've got over 200 high-rise blocks. Those blocks, a number of those will have been quite an age. Some of them date back to the early 1950s, where we've undertaken a lot of work. We've also got a number of blocks in the city that are of a particular design that we're looking at solutions that will safeguard the lives of those blocks for potentially another 30 years. Evaluating that at the moment and evaluating the solutions to that as to whether that is cost effective or we need to look at other opportunities. And we're also bringing into the programme additional investment where we can, so what I would call the green agenda. There's various streams of funding, most of which go with a series of capital letters that I'll be honest, I struggle to keep up with. One of them is the local authority delivery 2 programme, and we've been successful in bringing in just over an additional £7.5 million for measures that will help to make those properties greener, more carbon efficient, etc. I won't go through the capital investment programme that's provided in there, but there's a breakdown of that within the key elements of the programme, and that shows that the capital investment programme for this year is approved at just under £78.3 million, and that is a target for delivery, so that for the layers, as at the end of September. In terms of repairs and maintenance, some of this we talked about in responding to questions on the performance indicators. So it's maintaining that engagement with our contractors to ensure that service level agreements, KPIs are being delivered, and to maximise customer satisfaction. What we've seen over recent months has been transition from working within lockdown restrictions to a business as usual approach. The team, the service were particularly successful in managing through particularly the most severe of the restrictions in the lockdown to ensure that services were maintained, that repairs were being carried out, and also the very important gas servicing and safety programme for all of our properties was being maintained to ensure all had got valid safety certificates that were no more than 12 months old. We did talk about earlier the fact that we have seen this increase in demand, and that is across the city. It's not targeted on any particular area, but as I referred to earlier, we're doing analysis on that to try and understand that more. This is something we're going to see moving forwards. Also talked about the market conditions and the fact that it is a difficult market at present. Voids, we've got the separate reports, so I won't go into any detail here other than the need to address the repairs element of our void property turnaround to improve the timescales overall. And then finally, just to talk a little bit about what's happening with extensions and the future. So at the end of the current financial year, we've ended year 6 of the existing contracts. They were originally procured and awarded on, in terms of years, a 4+2+2 basis. So we agreed extensions for years 5 and 6, which we are coming towards the end of. And those extension discussions, helps to respond to Councillor Wood's question earlier, those extension discussions are still ongoing and are subject to acceptable commercial terms and are subject to acceptable performance. Some of that we have to sometimes look at in terms of balancing in terms of performance, but starting a new contract doesn't necessarily see performance maintained. New contracts can often lead in performance. So it's one of the considerations to put in there. But just to reiterate, the discussions are still in progress. But on the South contract, decision at Cabinet in March of this year was that we should seek to re-procure that contract, and we are currently out to tender for the South contract with tender returns due imminently, and a report for the award of that is targeted for December of this year to allow mobilisation and demobilisation to commence in January for that contract to commence in April 2022 to deliver again for 2 years so that it's consistent across the city. And then finally, just a note, we are looking at the various options at the moment for what happens in April 2024, which seems a long way away, but it's actually really only just around the corner in terms of commissioning. So we're looking at the various options at that at the moment in terms of what our recommended commissioning strategy will be for April 2024. That will be subject to cabinet approval and then commencement of that process. So thank you, Chair. That's an overview of what's happening at the moment.
Right, so on this report, Councillor Harmer?
Yeah, so one of the, well, can I first welcome the work that's been done on fire safety, but it does throw into sharp relief the lack of investment on climate change related issues, particularly improving the standard of insulation on our properties. We look at the climate change agenda as a whole. That is an area where, as a country, we've got a huge programme of work to do, and we're just not getting on with it anything like the speed or scale that we need to. Now, that's not a criticism of yourselves and the team. That's basically down to the fact that the government has not set up a programme of sufficient scale to get on with things. Now, you do mention that there's this lag to funding. It doesn't appear to be any of that in this year's figures, as far as I can see, so I've missed it. So presumably that's next year and on. But could I just ask a couple of questions about it? First of all, what will it prioritise? For example, I've got a couple of tower blocks in my ward that are uninsulated, and I know from tenants there to tell me about their heating bills of previous winters that are from much smaller properties, perhaps in those that are way bigger than mine. And I hate to think what's going to happen this winter with the level of electricity and gas charges going up at the rate they are. So I do hope that those sorts of properties that we have will benefit from that. But I'd love if you could explain a bit more about what that will do. And secondly, are we doing all that we can as creatively as possible to build up our capacity? Because we just have to believe at some point we will be expanding the work we do in this area. And that the problem will then be lack of skilled workers to do the work. So we need to be as creative as we can. We haven't got the money to do a big programme at the moment, okay, but we need to be as creative as we possibly can with capacity so that when that does start, as it must, we've got the capacity to respond to it.
Okay, so to touch on the first point in terms of the Lab 2 funding, that isn't in the figures that you've got at the breakdown of 78.2 million. It's additional to that, and we're just working with the team that has secured the bid on that in terms of what work that will cover. A range of options around that within the remit of the actual grant allocation. So with more detail back on that to another committee when I've actually got that detail. We're very conscious of being a lot of officer meetings recently in respect of Route to Zero and our housing stock. We're looking at there is a team already within inclusive growth looking at Route to Zero, but we'll also be having to roll into it later, looking to establish a team within housing, focusing on Route to Zero, and looking at some of the options that are out there and some of the funding solutions to that and whether those are viable. Equally within all of that, there is a separate work being looked at in respect to the housing levy account and opportunities to increase the amount of investment in our stock. So, suggest council with the forefront of it, but they were conscious of Route to Zero and the huge task ahead of us in terms of upgrading our stock. Obviously, where we can, with existing schemes, we're doing that. So some of the fire safety work I was mentioning, where there's significant external work being carried out. Whilst we're doing that, we're taking the opportunity to address the thermal efficiency of the building and building that into the programme. So naturally, within that, you can talk about huge expenditure on fire safety, but that actually also brings with it other improvements where it's appropriate, such as the efficiency of the cladding. It can be changed windows, major things like that.
Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thanks. As Councillor Harris just said, certainly welcome the update on the fire safety and the importance that we're attaching to it. Would it be possible, and I've put this request in before, can we have a breakdown of where we are on each tower block with regards to the sprinkler installation? We did get that before. And then just based on what you just advised us about the other works that are being done at the same time, I think it would be very useful if we knew, I had an idea what was being done at each tower block, you know, what other works were being done. I think that would be quite good for us to get an insight into that. Building safety managers, interestingly, you come up with the job evaluation. I think it's one of those job roles that maybe changes every time there's a committee meeting in London. And it's certainly become a far more important role than I think originally was thought. So we'd like to, it'd be nice to see the outcomes of that job evaluation. Again, sort of picking up on what Councillor Harris just said about the route to net zero and the green agenda, looking at the amount of money that we're going to be spending, it'd be nice to know, to be reassured that as much of that, or those materials are going to be resourced from local supply. And certainly, looking down the list, certainly what doors, well, we make doors, don't we? Shellforce, we're the company that actually makes doors. And do they make windows as well?
Doors, windows.
So it'd be nice to know that we're keeping the money within.
We are.
So that's very reassuring. And yeah, just to keep as much of that money inside Birmingham, if you like, and especially within our own companies. Contract extension, yeah, we did mention it earlier on. I'm quite concerned that, you know, there isn't a lot of time left to put these in place, and the discussions are still going on. And certainly on the size, you know, it was clearly candidate in March to go out to tender, but we didn't go out to tender until August. And we're hoping to get it awarded in December. That's quite a short tender period as well for the contractors. So, yeah, I'm just issuing a bit of concern because I have been concerned about the City Council's procurement exercise in the past. I just don't want to see this one going along the same way. But certainly, yeah, my concern is that we seem to be getting very, very near to the kick-off date, and we haven't decided what way we're going yet on this. And it would also be reassuring to know that moving forward, certainly on the contract extensions, yeah, is it purely simply a case of working with the same companies and allowing them a bit of leeway on basically, we all know the materials have gone up. Yeah, cost before and cost after would be quite nice. So that would be good. But certainly, and again, going back to the size, the invitation to tender, would you be able to tell us how many companies have shown an interest, or is that commercially restricted? So,
Yeah.
I'll try and make all the points on that. Just to clarify, the invitation to tender, I thought the way I put it in there to something, that isn't the start point of the tender process. So the tender process itself would have started back in April, I think it was. The actual invitation so that goes through the process of advertising it, receiving the inquiries and expressions of interest. then actually analysing that effectively to shortlist it in terms of the companies being put forwards to actually submit a bid, which is the point of invitation to tender. So that was in the process. For what we recognise, it's a tight time frame for the overall process. I think at the moment, without legal or procurement colleagues with me, I would have to err towards it being commercially sensitive.
Okay.
To actually indicate how many organisations are tendering, particularly the point when they will be finalising their figures. Anything on that being made public could impact on that. In terms of the contract extensions, yes, we are trying to come to a point whereby we've agreed acceptable commercial terms. Again, accepting that there are issues within the market, but what is acceptable, and also in terms of that against performance. So again, we do understand that having a tight time frame, but we'll take the necessary action on that to ensure that obviously these are services that can stop first. So ensure the arrangements are in place for that. Local supply, that's part of the stipulation within the social value and business charter elements, and we need to use local supply chains at a high percentage, and we do see that in terms of doors and windows. It isn't part of the contract, but we pretty much stipulate the contractors to use shelf walls, and we're looking at opportunities to increase the shelf walls in the coming financial years. I just don't think there's anything else.
The breakdown by tower block, we have that.
We do that. I can't do it today, but provide, we can provide an update on that. Yeah, we can provide an update on that. That's about sprinklers and the other fire safety work. So we can provide details on the latter part of the programme this year. This has been something going out a number of years. And the job evaluation on the building safety manager and officer, we a bit more detail back on that once we've got the outcome of that. It's a piece of work where the team work very hard to produce a job specification that matches the various qualifications and skills needed, and the role that we envisage to undertake probably a very important role with respect to the safety of our buildings and the safety of our residents in those buildings. I think I've covered everything, but if I've missed anything.
I think you covered everything, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Right, I was going to ask whether you officers ever get together with other local authority officers to kind of, pick up ideas about what other people are doing around the green agenda, for example, or fire safety. Do you have a chance to do that?
Certainly in terms of the fire safety, yes, particularly with mentioning the early adopters group and work with, I'm just going to call it the housing ministry for ease at the moment, so I can't remember the title of the new ministry. So there's regular meetings with that. Sarah, there was a meeting within in the last week on that. And there's various spin-off meetings on that. Members of organisations like Housemark in respect of benchmarking on other areas. I wouldn't say there was a great deal with other authorities at the moment around the green agenda. Some of those areas, probably getting some of those back on track post-pandemic, although some of them are really through with the use of Teams and Zoom for those meetings. Also, Natalie touched on earlier about housing transformation and transformation program that covers housing, not just housing management, capital investments and repairs. So we have got some external support at the moment doing a good draft review of our services. And as part of that, part of the reason for bringing some external support in was to be able to bring it off a good practice from elsewhere, which we'll be looking at across the piece, really, whether it's green agenda, housing management delivery, repairs delivery.
Okay. Well, I presume that comes under Graham Betts's, is it push for this prevention approach?
It certainly it will link with that whole prevention approach as well. Housing, as you know, became a standalone directorate in May of this year as part of the future initiatives of the council. It is therefore one of the council's major transformation programs. So that part of it will sit with overall Judy Griffin, but obviously working closely with Graham, his service area. And also within housing, the other elements of housing that isn't represented here today is our housing solutions and support service, which is all of the support around homelessness, housing allocations, etc.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Just quickly, Councillor Sharp, you want to come?
Just very quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll be able to help me anyway. We've got a block of flats in my ward. They're having some work done on them. And the work that's been done, they're using Kango hammers inside the property. The rents are trying to find out exactly what is happening within the block, but they can't seem to find out. And the other main thing that they're worried about is the people actually doing the work haven't been there for 7 weeks, which is causing an awful lot of problems for them. And I don't know if that comes on you or if you can point in the right direction, please.
Most probably does. What it is at the end of the meeting, we'll get details of the block from you.
Sounds like there needs to be more communication there, doesn't it, with tenants about exactly what's going on and what isn't.
Well, I have to say the people doing the work aren't very friendly coming forward.
Right. Oh, well, it sounds like there definitely needs to be a conversation there then.
Get more information.
Yeah, thank you. Right, now, can we move on then to the voids report? Could you be very brief on this, I think, whoever's going to do it? Just sort of, kind of key issues, if you could just draw out any key issues for us. And then I presume that the people here who went on the visits, I don't know whether you want to make.
I'll leave a lot of time for questions.
Yeah, but we've only got sort of like quarter of an hour left, so I'm conscious of time,
So obviously you've had the contents of the report. What we picked out was just some kind of key parts within the process and kind of examples where we can make some improvements. So first part of the process is around the moving out and the pre-vacation visits. Currently those are only taking place within the south, so we're looking to roll that out across the city. So that is when the notice is served. We go and visit the property to make sure that if there are ongoing issues, if there's been any kind of tenancy, overgrown gardens, that we are then looking to address those as quick as we can within the void, or at least we're alerting contractors to the fact that there may be some delays or that it's going to be a major works void, which will hopefully reduce some of that. As I said, we are looking to improve and increase the staff there by an extra 2 to cover the other side of the city. Keys to contractors. So obviously when we get the keys from the tenants, the contractor, we're currently performing 2 reminders there. So people are giving their keys in generally before the notice expires. So that's a good piece of news. Advertising the void cycle. So present cycle is Thursday to Monday. And all void keys received on Thursday, Friday to Tuesday. What the consideration is if we end the void cycle from Thursday to Sunday, so taking off an extra 1 day advert, which would again reduce the cycle period down, so we might be able to get some time back. The shortlisting for voids, that currently takes place within 24 hours. We've got no real delays with that. They're shortlisting 2 properties at that point. And at present, we are looking to do, we currently do viewings just with 1 tenant at the moment. We've actually found that that's been quite flexible. People are generally taking the property. The fit for let tenancy start date, so from the minute that the property is fit until it starts, as you can see at the moment, that's currently at 17 days. Below gives you a breakdown of the viewings and when they're accepted. So in the main, we're at 86%. The target is 10 days. And what we are really focusing on at the moment is, again, improving the amount of staff availability that we have, ensuring that an appointment for a take to view is booked within 48 hours of us receiving keys and fit. That in the main is happening. At present, some of the issues that we are receiving is that obviously the tenancy start date doesn't take place until the following Monday. So if, for example, a customer has an appointment, so void becomes available on the Friday, they're going to have their viewing, accept the property and have a letting on the Tuesday, the tenancy start date wouldn't then start till the following Monday. So there is a further 4-day lag there. So there is a consideration and a review to consider whether we actually look at any day start dates. So we would expect you have your viewing, you move, the tenancy starts the next day and you move in. Now, obviously, from a customer expectation point of view, with some of the customers we're dealing with, that is quite a difficult turnaround, but it's something to consider within the constraints of the void turnaround. Repairs performance, I'll let Sarah just take really quickly.
Yeah, so as mentioned in the report from Mira, there are some concerns around some contract areas of performance which are affecting the void turnaround. And they're areas that we're currently working with the contractors on. We've had been quite proactive with working groups now for about 6 months, working across all contractors to share best practice against the best performing contractors and seeing if we can use what the processes that have got in place with the poorer performing contractors. As Mira explained in the report, there are a couple of the areas that have made significant improvements and are working towards the new targets that we've got and the pilot that we have, but there are still some concerns in the other areas. So they're the ones that we've now concluded the pilot, we've agreed what the new targets are. We're in a short period of business as usual for a month to get those new contractual changes embedded, and then we'll be looking at issuing rectification notices. And the outcome of that will be potentially that we can take work off the contractors if necessary and look at other means, because the penalties that we're putting in and the damages, if the contractors aren't performing, we still need to be doing something to improve the void turnaround. So that's what we're currently exploring at the moment.
We just on the key actions, we're having regular meetings with the void teams around fit for let tenancy start dates, ensuring that anything that needs to be escalated or rolled over to the following week is signed off by managers. We are having a huge push around ensuring that fit for let's chasing customers if customers are non-attendance, so that there is a real focus. The current performance for October is looking good. So we're at 13 days fit for let tenancy start date. So that's a significant improvement before. And the current void is looking at 36 days. So we're now in our second week of October, but the prediction is that we will see a decline in this performance. So it's something that is being regularly monitored and reviewed. The void standard has also been looked at. And we are putting some recommendations forward to consider with potential new contracts around any improvements that we can make there, which may also reduce the need of any kind of failed lettings.
Okay, is that everything? Thank you.
Yeah.
Not bad. Right. Councillor Wood, you first.
Thanks, Chair. Where do I start? Like some of my other colleagues, I too went out and visited a couple of the voids. As Councillor Oldham has already pointed out, what I also saw was what I would consider to be a failure in tenancy management or support. Because just like Councillor Oldham reported, this garden was so overgrown that the hedges on both sides actually met in the middle. And before that place can be re-let and cleared out, all of that hedge growth is going to have to be taken out through the front door. Yeah, it was appalling. It really was. There's clearly been a great bend on how we communicate with our tenants. Clearly, this person, I would say this person needed support to a person that actually passed away. But there was obviously a support issue somewhere in there. And we've got contractors going in there. If we can do annual services on gas because it's a legal requirement, I dare say we should be able to visit our own properties. So I was very, very disappointed around that. I was also equally appalled when I was told the condition that the houses would be re-let. I fail to see how we can try and enforce or expect incoming tenants to look after a property that clearly we have failed to look after ourselves. Going in and seeing, this was an example that I saw was that front room, wallpapered ceiling, person had obviously smoked inside it for about 40 years. A hole in the ceiling that was told would be cut out, plastered over, fine. But unfortunately, that leaves the rest of the ceiling that was wallpapered. And if I was a tenant moving in there, the first thing I would probably do is take that paper off the wall, off the ceiling, and the ceiling would come down. It really is terrible. I understand the urgency to get our voids re-let. But I really do feel desperately sorry for people that are coming to see those properties, and probably at the back of their mind is, I've got to accept this or else I'll lose it. And I really do feel we cannot really enforce, or find it difficult to enforce, tenancy agreements and living up to standards when what we're asking them to accept, I'm sorry, is substandard in my opinion. I've seen student accommodation, lots of student accommodation that's far better in Birmingham. What I'd like to suggest, Chair, if possible, as a result of that, is I would like us to really do an in-depth inquiry into our voids. I really do think if we showed a little bit more care and attention before we let them out, we might actually get better houses back at the end. And I would like to do a couple of visits to RSLs, registered providers, to see how they get their housing stock back and what they re-let it out as well. Because it really is bad.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Can I bring Councillor Locke in as well?
I agree entirely. My thoughts were, what if we were fleeing domestic abuse or something like that? Would I have that? Or would I, parents or a family member? We wouldn't, It's better the dog sign or something, because it was, couldn't expect people to live in that. I know it was before and afterwards. It's got to be better than that. We all deserve better, and our tenants do.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Locke. Councillor Oldham.
Yes, thank you. As I mentioned to you when I saw you earlier in the corridor, I went home and told John what I had seen. And he said that he thought we used to, this was my husband who was a councillor for 30 years, but is now retired. 30 years actually. And he said, we used to offer 2 months free rent when you took on the tenancy if you were prepared to decorate it. He thought that was it, something like that. I said I was afraid what might happen is you give the free rent and no one would bother to go check around and check if they had decorated. But I think that's a good idea. I really think it's a good idea, because the danger is that if you go in and it's because the man who showed me around said we don't necessarily redecorate. They thought they would redecorate this one that Mary and I saw because it was so awful, but they wouldn't normally. Well, it needs to be in a good state to begin with, doesn't it? Or you're never going to get there. So I think if we're not going to redecorate ourselves, then some kind of incentive to the tenant that's taking it on, you're taking it on, we accept it's not in really good condition.
Yes.
So we're giving you, say, 1 month or 2 months free rent so that you can spend some money putting it right. Then that seems to me quite a good idea, because something needs to be done. It was awful. And as far as the gardens, I have a real annoyance about the fact that we have children in tower blocks without gardens, and then we have other people with properties with a garden who clearly don't want it. Because this one had the brambles up to here, you couldn't go out in it, they didn't want it. Well, why on earth don't we swap things round so that the people who don't want a garden don't have a garden, and the people who are desperate for somewhere for their children to play can have something with a garden? It's not rocket science, is it? People seem to be in the wrong properties.
Okay, who's going to pick this up?
I'll make a start.
Okay.
I'm sure Natalie and Sarah will chip in. First, it was about the board tenancy management. I think when we were responding earlier on the KPIs, in affected voids, we acknowledge that that's got to change, and having a much more proactive, preventative and local feel to it. And if we need to acknowledge that the properties we need to visit more often, so that things such as the overgrown garden isn't happening, or if it's starting to become overgrown, we can pick up on that and why. Because it could be they don't want a garden. It could be there's another underlying issue. In fact, an overgrown garden is been using as a little bit of as an example of how we want to become much more proactive. Not to refer to the service having been very functional in recent years, and people visiting for just one issue. People visiting just for the garden, because of the garden, instead of saying the garden's becoming overgrown. Why? Maybe it didn't used to before. And actually, as you start to dig into it, there's more underlying issues. The tenant isn't able to maintain the garden because of some form of illness or injury. That could mean that they're not in work, but they haven't got the advice and support in terms of benefits that they can access, a whole range of things. So we fully accept that we need to change our approach to tenancy management, and that's exactly what we're in the throes of doing, to put that right. And yet part of that can also be discussions where people aren't keeping the garden because they're not interested in it. Then that's where there just needs to be discussions about whether it's the right property for you. Because equally, they may see that as beneficial to themselves as well, to move to somewhere where they haven't got to maintain the garden. And as you say, somebody, especially the children, could benefit from that being available. So we have to become much more interactive and proactive on that.
And that is fit to let.
And again, we're very conscious of the low standard of Birmingham's empty property refurbishment standard. I think myself and my fellow officers would agree on that. Something that's been in place for a number of years, and something that I think is put in place on the basis of the demand is such that we can let the properties. So it's demand versus finance. But again, we've been having exactly the same conversations as you've just put to us in your responses and questions, which is if we let the property to very low state of repair, what message does that convey?
Yes.
So our tenant coming in, that's what we expect. So, we expect to get it handed back at some point, either no better than when we handed it over, or quite possibly worse. It's something, I won't steal it from Natalie, but something that Natalie is very recently, which was about the wallpaper. And would be likely better taking the wallpaper off, because yes, if the plaster comes off, let's get it done and there, rather than further down the road. You could argue the only advantage to us as a city, it being done further down the road, is that the repair is done under what is currently a price per property contract. So we don't actually pay specifically for that repair. But and don't get me wrong, I'm not.
So in that case, the contracts are wrong. I'm sorry, for the sake of that, putting it right in front of you.
Yeah, when I say that, I'm just saying that that is the only benefit. But we can turn that down as a benefit, because if we change that in terms of how we let the voids and it's reducing the number of repairs that follow up, then that is a cost saving for the contractor and an argument for the cost saving therefore to the city. So we do take on the points around the very low property standard, and looking at that as to whether, well, actually all that thing's about is more time and cost to the city in terms of how that's maintained. And in terms of decorations, I haven't been involved with the service long enough to know if we used to give 2 months free rent. It's something Natalie might know about. I know at one time that we used to do things around decorating voucher schemes. There's a number of companies out there that are still interested in offering some form of incentive. So again, that's something else we should be looking at. I think one of the issues that was raised at the time, I think it came to our city housing liaison board, was a concern about what we were offering as an incentive for new tenants as opposed to our long-standing tenants. So if we look at something like that, then we're going to look at that across the board. But certainly, yes, why not have certain properties that it comes with some form of an incentive to decorate, whether that's in the form of vouchers or whether it's in the form of some form of event holiday.
Okay, right, thank you, John. I think when Councillor Holbrook rang me up to explain that she couldn't be here today, she did suggest that we have a look at voids in a bit more detail. We look at the budget, and that we also possibly, dependent on time, arrange a set of visits to other places, for example, RSL properties, to compare standards of voids, and then for the committee a bit of work around that. So is that something that we would want to have a look at, bearing in mind what we've all seen and said? Okay, so it's like we're agreed on that. So no doubt you'll come back with some, information about how your review is going. Yeah.
Can I just come in, if that's all?
Yes, just briefly, because I'm conscious of time here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just think on some of the points that John's raised and around the gas servicing. So what we are currently doing, because you are absolutely right, it's a missed opportunity. Contractors are going out into our properties, and we annually do that. We're looking at how our systems connect with gas servicing. So if, contractors raise a hygiene hoarding issue, how does that then translate over into tenancy management? So we've currently started a working group to optimise our contacts with tenants, because whilst we are saying housing management, absolutely, there are other organisations, there are other parts of the service that are entering our properties, and actually what we need to do is align that and making sure that, it is coming through. So that's something we're looking at. The other part that we're picking up on is around the high cost voids and the voids that are coming back in that standard. So what is the profile? Because currently we need to understand the profile. So is it elderly residents over 60? Is it young female, single people, is it male? So we've got some understanding around actually where we need to target our support and where we need to target our visiting approach. And that's a position that we do need to get to. Overgrown gardens is about 40% of our work at present. We do need to come up with a better solution of how we manage it, because enforcement and injunctions, yes, we can do them and we do, but they're about 2,000 at a time. And really, does that necessarily give us the longevity and the kind of solution focus that we want? So it is an area that we do need to pick up on. And the void standard, I was out with councillors as well on the visit. And yeah, it is something that my officers has raised as well. And I think it's something that we're recognising we need to improve on. But I think there are certain opportunities around connectivity across the service and optimising those contacts that people do make. And we have to just be clear and understand the problems that are coming through. So the profile really of where people aren't maintaining, because people do, people do maintain.
Okay, thank
No,
you.
just-
Yes,
Can I just
yeah.
make a very
Yes,
quick
Councillor
suggestion?
Sharp, yeah. And you want to come back quickly, Councillor?
When you come to looking at getting grass cut and everything, and they're older, is it not worth asking if they're ex-forces? Because if they are ex-forces, you can turn to SAPRA, the British Legion.
Yeah, I mean, we use welcome change in some areas of the city.
I know that all
Yeah,
I'm saying is that when I've spoken to staff from the British Legion,
Okay.
they've never been asked by the council to go in and cut it. And they would do, because they've got the people to do it. And it would take it away from you having to worry about it.
Okay, and this is where we need to get connectivity back into the estate, so we can really build on the partnerships that are currently there.
It's a bit more imagination, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
how we can solve these things, yeah. You mentioned Welcome Change. I assume that's the organisation you mean that's in my area. They were fantastic.
Yeah, we use them.
And that third sector organisation who'd be willing to offer a low cost service.
Yeah, and we have got our own alternate garden scheme as well. We have got
That's the
that.
kind of solution that we need there. Councillor, would you want to come back?
Just a quick one, I'd also appreciate a little bit more information, not obviously now, because
Yeah.
you're going to have it. But on the major works, voids 1 to 3, if you look at some of this, Waits Western days on MWV1, 51 days. And the big extreme is 115. That is 6 months, near enough 6 months. So could we have some more in-depth detail on these figures as to when these properties became void and why are they still void? Yeah, 115 days, that's bizarre.
That's certainly a question I was going to ask you. It's a heck of a lot of time, isn't it? So we need some answers, yeah. Okay, so we're agreed then that we're going to have a bit more of a look at voids at a future meeting. Can we very briefly, is that all right, everyone? If we just finish this off with the tenant engagement review, I think this is just for a sort of, you're telling us that this is going to happen, aren't you, really, here? And I don't know, but I'll say this now, that I think it would be good if this committee could give evidence to your tenant engagement review. That's something, that I feel that we could contribute to. Maybe we could say something about if I assume that, for example, housing liaison board stuff will be in there. I think that some of us attend housing liaison boards, so I think it would be good for us to be consulted, if that's possible, if everyone agrees. Yeah, give our views.
Okay, well, I'm Louise Fletcher, I'm the Senior Service Manager for Tenant Engagement, and I know that you've all read the presentation, so I'm not going to go through it in any detail. So that bit about the question about can you be involved, I'll go back to Emily and see who's been conducting this review for us. She's reached the end of her evidence gathering, if that makes sense. And the time of us coming here doesn't necessarily fit with your request, but I'm sure she can factor that in. It might just delay us getting a report for a couple of weeks and see how we can make that happen. And really, it was just to let you know we've secured that contract. We're now going to review, and then we can bring a report back to you as and when that's done. And instead, what we've done is, what I wanted to really be clear about is we're measuring what we do around engagement against the social housing white paper, the building safety bill, and how that tells us we need to give tenants a voice rather than just saying, are Birmingham good or not? Is the city housing engagement good or not? So it is measuring it against a specification that looks at it in a very broad sense, and then will give us a number of recommendations about how we can make sure that every tenant has a voice, not just the ones necessarily that are involved in our formal setting, as it were, that go to those meetings. And how do we get to hear from every tenant that will probably pick up on a lot of the discussion today around voids and standards and all of those kind of things. But that's what we're interested to get an outcome, and then obviously build an action plan from there. But I will go back to Emma.
Thank you, Louise. Thanks. I think we'd appreciate that. And I think as the main scrutiny committee around the housing service, that it's important that we should give our views. So, okay. Right. Thank you on that one then. And we look forward to seeing the outcome, the suggestions. Right, moving on then to the work programme, which is item 7. Unless anyone else wants to say anything on the turn of you, no. So 7 work programme, right. I think on that. So we've got various things, haven't we, coming along in the future. Does anybody have any comments on that? I think next time we've got the community safety partnership coming along with some stuff around a report on bedding as well, and the implementation, the flight implementation report. And also, I think we should have the CCTV stuff rolled in with that, so that we know exactly what's happening on that. So, do we agree the work programme then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Date of next meeting then is Thursday, the 11th of November. So that's not that far away. Hopefully we can give our evidence at that meeting if we can squeeze it in. We'll have to talk to the chair anyway about how to do that. So that's that. Number 9 is requests for calling. I don't think we have any, do we? No. Any other urgent business from anybody? No. And authority for the chair and officers to act between meetings. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for your attendance.